A video of a black man dying goes viral. Will this time be any different from all the others? Hi, my name is Aiden Akhtar, and this is episode 1 of the BIPOCanadian podcast. So, if you haven't heard about the most recent Black Lives Matter movements during these last few months, you may be a little too isolated even if you're stuck at home during this pandemic. It was catalyzed after a video was released of George Floyd, a black man, being murdered in broad daylight by police officer Derek Chauvin, while 3 fellow officers let it happen. This took social media by storm. At first, it felt like every channel you watched, there it was. It quickly fueled BLM activism, with protests and the urge to donate or sign petitions popping up everywhere. Somewhere in the middle, there was the controversial trend of posting a black square on your social media. Now, as some of the larger scale social media engagement appears to be on somewhat of a decline, we want to keep this conversation going. To weigh in on some of this, joining us is Heaven and Akin, and I'll just let them do a little intro on themselves.
Hi, thank you for having me to talk about this important conversation. My name is Heaven Berhe, as you said, and I'm a university student at the University of Saskatchewan, and I am the current president of the African Student Association, and I look forward to having this conversation with you.
Hi everyone, and I'm really honored to also be here. So I'm a student at the University of Saskatchewan as well. I currently study political studies. I was the previous president of the International Students Association, and currently I'm the youth coordinator at the Truly Alive Youth and Family Foundation. That's as a profession. And yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming on with us. So let's hop right into it. So, well, all of this transpired. The main event transpired in the United States. Racism still exists everywhere, and it sparked protests worldwide. So do you think there are more specific things that Canadians need to focus on in order to address the racism here? Or are the steps towards equality more so universal across, anywhere that you may be?
For me, it's a little bit of both. Um, these issues are worldwide, and you clearly saw that during the protests and the solidarity that happened all over the world. And racism happens in different forms all over the world, um, towards any group. When you're talking about the Canadian context, it's a little bit tricky because there is this false sense of we're not like that, or a false sense of comparison, which is at least we're not as bad as the US, therefore we don't have to address it, which I think is a fair assessment to say. However, it's not true. And you can clearly see that if you've taken classes that address these issues. If you go back in history and just look at the formation of Canada in itself, it was based on the narrative that a certain group saw itself better than one, and Canada as we know it is formed. But I think we need to address it. The issue then comes in the sense of people don't want to feel guilty, so it's better to just completely ignore it. But I always say guilt is a very powerful emotion, and if we use it correctly, it can influence a positive change. And that positive change is in regards to addressing, as I said, the history, looking at policies that are working till today and in affecting the lives of not only people of like color, but new immigrants that are coming into this country. And so there are so many things that we're ignoring, and I wish more people in Canada did not use that narrative of at least we're not as bad as the US to clean up what's happening here in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost a dangerous thing. And even if, like you said, it may be somewhat of a fair assessment, it's dangerous at any point to downplay racism anywhere.
Can I speak a bit?
Yes,
Even
absolutely.
I 100% agree with Heaven, and that's why I'm impressed you guys got such brilliant mind to be here to speak on this matter. So, like what she said, it's similar and different. It's similar in the sense that racism all over the world, it still boils down to hate, just hating on people because they are different, hating on people just by their skin color, and all the negative stereotypes and prejudice that goes along with it. But it's unique to Canada because there's this false sense of virtue signal. I don't know why I associated with Canada. Like everyone just believes they're nice, like they are the good brother of the US, whereas US is just this racist place. Whereas in Canada, first off, the racism is it's targeted mostly towards indigenous peoples, although blacks are also affected, but just based on the history, indigenous people feel the brunt of the racism the most. And also, so just as Heaven said, it's just, I feel like the guilt, that's something, but it's just because they feel like people think Canadians are just nice. People believe they are much better than the US. So it's like they don't feel like they need to do much just because of that reputation of, oh, we are the good guys. So that's what I wanted to add. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. I think that it kind of plays into the idea of, inaction and how this sort of ignorance of saying, oh, Canadians are so nice, at least we're not as bad as America, that in itself is ignorance and can lead into inaction. And I'm sure that that you've heard this saying, especially over the past few months, that inaction in itself is action. And so
Mhm.
these mentalities definitely build into that action through inaction. And so a way that lots of people were trying to take action was through social media. And when it comes to the general public, a lot of the times it seems like when people are not directly affected by this, the mass sometimes eventually loses interest and it sort of becomes this trend. And obviously, for people who are affected by it constantly, it's never just this trend. And so, do you think that this movement, this most recent movement, will kind of follow that same tragic path of this is just another trend for, the mass uh, of social media? Like, for
Mm.
example, the Australia wildfires or the Hong Kong protests, majority of the social media engagement died off far before the issues themselves.
Mm. I like that question because it I think a lot of us now, by being at home because of the pandemic, have been exposed to realities that we perhaps weren't aware of. Um, these tragedies were always happening, and these protests always took place. But I don't think all of us at once sat down and experienced them or witnessed them. And with George Floyd, I think it's just how heinous the crime was is what caused that big of an uproar. To your point, though, I'm talking with a friend a few days ago, and in forms of being anxious and things, I said, is my life as minuscule as the Dalgona coffee that came and went, and so with such things, I don't think they hold um, power in people's lives. Number one, as you said, because people don't experience it day to day. So for a person of color and a person that is black in this moment, my activism did not stop because people stopped, because it affects me directly, right? And for those people that stopped, I would ask them to think, what made you stop? There's people still, like out there fighting the good fight. What was it in that week that made you want to do it but not to continue it? Because it has stopped. I even noticed with my Instagram feed, it has changed. And so I wonder what it is that makes people get involved. Is it that you don't want to seem not woke? But now that people have moved on, you've moved on. But with such humanitarian causes, I would compel people to question themselves. Why am I doing this? Why am I posting this? What's the point? What message am I trying to send? Because I think if you do that and you go to the core of why these movements are happening and you look at what the core message of it is and what they're trying to fight for, it would be, I would think, extremely difficult for you to stop, because there is that humanist aspect of it. And again, with social media, I'm very thankful for it, but also at the same time, it's that good evil type of thing where something, if you overpump it, people get really bored over time. And so it's both sides. It's both. I don't think it has died yet, but I also think it's not as much as it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I'm often thinking to myself is that one of the grander overarching problems with the world in general is a lack of empathy. And like you said, when the fight never stops for people who are affected by it, why should it stop for people who aren't? And so, Akin, did you have anything to add on that note?
Oh yes, yes. I think um again, it's just being in these kinds of conversations. I've had this so many times, like, and what I've realized, like, it's almost never ends, because one thing you find out is at the end of the day that these things are extremely complicated. I met one of my professors. I'm sure Heaven would know Simone Horvitz.
Yes.
Surprise, surprise. She lives right close to my area. So we went on a walk a couple times, and we were just talking about these issues. And I told her how I've finally made up my mind to study political studies going in from next year. And part of the reason why is because I've always been passionate about these things. But then I have been so involved to the point where I've realized I can actually almost do nothing. Like, I feel so inadequate. And it's like with all the change, all the work, all the protest, all the advocacy, it's like nothing is really changing. Reason being because we don't understand the system. We don't understand how complicated these things are. Like the whole political infrastructure. It's like it's a real engine. And because it's politics, everyone says it, so everyone just complains, and it's like, yeah, this is what they should do. Yeah, it's this guy that is bad, it's that guy that is bad. But if you actually sit down and put yourself in those places, then you see how complicated things are, and which leads to my next point, which is that change actually takes a long time. Like real change, sustainable change. And I feel like, our generation, it's a good thing. I was listening to Barack Obama's and the Democratic Party rallied like for Joe Biden. And he says that a lot, how he's so happy that our generation, we are much more aware and we are much more engaged in civil discourse. We are much more woke. People say that too. He didn't say the word woke, but that's kind of the connotation. But the problem with being that woke is we want that change so bad that we are not even realistic about how it's going to happen. Like, and again, even with this George Floyd's case, there's so many reasons why it seems special. First of all, we have social media technology, like, and also everyone has been at home for how many months, so everyone was already pissed and there was already so many stress there. So when this was like just another trigger and everyone just poured out, so I feel like even all the protests, it's not just anger against George Floyd, it's just anger in general. It's summer, people are stuck at home, they can't go to work, they can't go to school, so all that thing also plays a role in why it was so big. And also, even regardless of that, again, real change takes real time. No matter how much laws you want to put in place, you can't legislate love. Like, I think it's Denzel Washington who says such. Like, you really can't force people. Although I hate racism, but how do I actually get them to make that change? Which leads to my next point, social media. So social media makes everything accessible. Like you literally have the whole world at your fingertips. However, when people, like, for instance, when there were those black squares going on Instagram, many people just put up, all these social media posts. And it's so easy to do, again, just at your fingertips. But when they do that, there's the advantage that they create more awareness, but there's this disadvantage where there's the peer pressure aspect of it. So Heaven was talking about how why has it just died down so quickly? Because on social media, all your friends are doing it, like, and you just feel like at some point, I put out some things on social media and I was like, do I really believe in these things? Like, why did I actually do it? Is it because everyone is doing it? And if you do that because everyone else is doing it, then no matter what motive you think, I just think it's wrong because it's not genuine. It's just for virtue signal. You want to look like you two, you're, again, as Heaven said, you two, you're woke and you also support black people. Whereas some of these people are actually racist themselves. But when they put the thing on social media, they appear like, oh, they're the good guys. And everyone else who didn't put it on social media is racist. So it's like when people do that, it distracts from the real work, which takes more time, takes more conversations, takes more diligence. Like for instance, I find like in my job, again, my at the True Alive Youth and Family Foundation, it is so hectic and so busy because there's so much planning that has to go in. And like I realized like to go and put some of the good work we are doing on social media, it actually takes out time from the real work we are doing. So what you find is that people who are doing the real work to create a much inclusive society, you don't see them as much as on social media because they are doing the real work. But people who spend all their time just making social media noise, they are not doing anything. So it's like that's part of why you don't see any real change because everyone is just again just on social media and it's creating awareness, which is a good thing, but in their own personal lives they're still racist. In their, I talk about how people talk about slavery a lot. My grandma still owns slaves, and because where I come from, it is normal, absolutely normal. So when I'm complaining about slavery, like I'm like I need to talk to my grandma too because she's doing the same thing. Like many of my friends and family, they are doing the same thing. When you talk about racism, you go to some, for instance, no offense, but my conversation with Indian folks and like they too would admit to themselves that they might actually be more racist than some white people. So it's like the real work is more complicated and it's much more real if people want to confront it, but just doing everything on social media, it's gonna create awareness, but it's not gonna solve the real issue. So I hope I didn't take too much time on that tangent,
No,
but
no, no, that's all
yeah,
right.
that's my
I love
piece.
to hear it. Everything you say, it's very, very valuable. Um, and yeah, like just to kind of go back to on what you guys were saying there, like take the blackout Thursday, posting the black squares, and back to why people were doing that, right? It could have been, more about peer pressure than it was about people actually believing in it. People saw, you know, everyone's posting these black squares, and honestly, I woke up, saw everyone was posting black squares to their Instagram and that it said Black Lives Matter, and so I went, "Oh, I guess I better post a black square and say Black Lives Matter." But then, 30 minutes later, I'm told by a friend, maybe this isn't such a good idea because there was some controversy regarding that. And I had to question myself. I woke up, saw that people were doing it, and then did it. But I didn't wake up and think that day, I'm going to make a post, advocating for Black Lives Matter. I woke up, saw other people were doing it, and then did it myself. And I think that I'm guilty there. That's part of the wrong mentality as to why I should have been doing that, because I was participating in a social media trend instead of making positive change. And so just in regards to some of the controversy that happened with that, you know, that it ended up sort of being that there was just a bunch of black squares when you looked up hashtag Black Lives Matter instead of there being things that mattered. And so why do you think some of that went so wrong, aside from some of the things that I mentioned and was guilty of that day?
Before I answer that, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
When so you said, and then thank you for being that honest. I think that's very important. When you, let's say that day you didn't post it because someone did it, how do you envision it being the right way to do it?
Well, I think that one of my friends did post something that I thought was a lot more effective. She found a good link that was to donate towards the cause. I can't remember the exact link, but she donated what money she could and posted the screen that said, I donated to support Black Lives Matter, and encouraged people to take solid action towards that. And I think that was a very effective and good way of doing that, to actually take action, or to share petitions. That there was a lot of petitions going around at the time. And I think that, these ways that, like Akin said, social media on its own can't quite be enough, because it's just noise. But it can be a good tool, like you said, to raise awareness and to push for, direct change. And I think those are more useful ways of utilizing social media. Instead of posting a black square to, create just, like I said, noise.
That's, I think, like the ideal way. I do want to say though, before I answer your question, this is, I see activism almost as a spectrum, right? So there's people that have never done it and they're pretty lost on like, how do I go around this? So I never want to knock down someone that posted a black screen and and called it a day. That might have been the first time they did that, and so I would never want to discourage them, because again, that will push them to do it more and more, which is what we want. And then there's, of course, in that group is going to be some people that just wanted to look woke, as we've been saying. But that's okay too, because even in that sense, someone might have seen that and could have, looked up, why is everything, why does everyone have a black screen? And then it will, cause awareness. So even though it's noise, it can sometimes be good noise. The controversy, however, it blows my mind how triggered people get by the word black. And I'm black, and I never, this is not something that I sit and think about all the time. It's just the way I am. But it just, blew my mind that even the people that pushed back, they were pushing back in a very ignorant way. And I say ignorant, not just insult someone, but ignorance is just a state where you don't have information about something. And the reason for pushing back was pretty, uninformed. It was either a hate of the organization BLM, because it somehow became against white, which it is not. And so to me, that was absurd. And even to people that were like, oh, it's taken away from the message of the Black Lives Matter. No, I honestly disagree, in that it helped some people see it and understand what the movement is about. So again, of course, in anything you do, there's going to be a backlash. But for me, it's just look at the people that are doing the work and just like walk with that. Sometimes you're going to get criticism. If it's constructive, take it. If it's not, push it back. And for me, a lot of the pushback was not constructive, so I didn't really pay attention to it. But that's not to say that someone perhaps saw it as constructive, which is okay too. So I don't know, but they're just both sides to it. That's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Akin?
I'm sorry, I was listening to what you guys were saying, but I'm not sure what the question exactly was to respond to.
Oh, so
I think I got distracted a bit because I had to move something.
Yeah, for sure, no worries. And so we were just kind of going over how the Blackout Thursday, when everyone sort of just posted black squares, how there was sort of a controversy and a pushback to that, and sort of just your thoughts on why there was a controversy, and if it was warranted.
Well, again, Heaven just said it. Like if there's a movement that doesn't hurt anyone, then is it really a movement? Like if you're actually trying to cause change, then there'll be some pain. Like some people would actually get hurt. Some people have to be challenged. Some people have to be fired. Like there has to be, yeah. And especially when you think about how many of these systems in our world, like, at least I can speak a lot for indigenous peoples, which should also could apply to black people. It's like it was built around certain people and it was built to favor certain people. So if you're gonna have to deconstruct and make some, progressive changes in those systems to favor certain other people, then it's very likely that the people who were favored primarily by those systems might lose something. And that's where people begin to push back because they feel threatened, although sometimes that's not even the case. Like why should it hurt you to open, say, your organizations for more black people? Like we're talking about promoting black businesses. Like if that's a problem for you, then you're probably part of the problem. Because so again, it's just that issue of like it's a movement. We are challenging the status quo, so people would definitely retaliate. However, I'm trying to remember the name of this actress who some people really were kind of on her neck because of her social media posts on Black Lives Matter. I'm trying to remember her name. I think she was the one who acted as Hermione in Harry Potter. One actress though from Hollywood. I can't remember her name. But I was just listening to some of people's backlash against her because she made some posts about Black Lives Matter. And because just her style in Instagram, she usually has a white frame around every single post she makes. And people were complaining about that. And I was just like, again, it's like people have to be reasonable. So in as much as we want to make a real change, it's like sometimes people just get really touchy and really, bogged down by some, and maybe I'm wrong because I don't know all the details, but from what I saw, I was like, this lady put a black square out and she just had the design of her Instagram page on it because that's how every other post is. And they were complaining like, is she trying to say that her Instagram design is much important than black lives? Clearly that was not what she was saying. So so sometimes we give these people reason to push back, because sometimes it's like when people are overreacting and people are being overly emotional. And hell, some of the riots, like if you're going to loot in the name of black lives, I am absolutely against that. It doesn't matter how many people died. Two wrongs will never make a right. Martin Luther King once said that we can't use darkness to drive out darkness, that we can't use hate to drive out hate, that it only adds to a dark night void of stars, something along those lines. So if we're actually going to make a real change, we, and this is part of the problem with Donald Trump. It's like no matter how, if you're trying to do something good, you must, in as much as we recognize that there would surely be backlash and opposition and some people that don't just like it will just make a heck out of it, but you must also make sure not to give them an excuse to do that. So sometimes when we ourselves who are trying to make this change, we misbehave or we begin to overly criticize people who are even trying to help, sometimes that also gives excuse to these people to backlash and say, you see, that's what they're all about. They just want to cause trouble and just shame everyone all the time. So that's another perspective I have to the backlash we got.
Yeah, absolutely. Those were some terrific points. So I think it, just like with many things, it kind of comes down to a balance, right? A balance between actual, actual change as opposed to, just a social media trend, but also, you know, encouraging change of all forms, well, not change, encouraging activism of all forms. And so just sort of a balance, to encourage people to do more, but also to not necessarily criticize them for doing what they did. Would you agree?
Exactly that.
So I just wanted to add something. So there's this concept in psycho. Actually, I didn't ask. Can I?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Just hop in whenever you guys want. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a concept in psychology called groupthink, and it's how human beings tend to be very rational and reasonable. However, when they get into a group, then they tend to lose their individuality into that group. So it's like wherever the group goes, they don't even think twice, they just follow. So that's why sometimes, and that's why again, social media is just I feel like our generation, if we are really gonna progress in anything, we really need to understand social media because I feel it's something we don't still understand. It's a powerful platform, but it's not the ultimate. So social media encourages a lot of this groupthink I'm talking about. So that's why you see, people would say the most horrible things on social media, but if you meet them in person, they are pretty nice people. Someone would call me a black piece of shit in person, but it's very easy to say it on a tweet or stuff like that. So sometimes that is also what contributes to some of these problems we are seeing, and where some people like sometimes it's like some black people just begin hating on some white person. Sometimes we've seen issues like that just on social media, and they're just cursing and stuff like that. However, they won't do that in person. So there's the component of groupthink, which is when everyone in a group just think alike, like mob rule. But there's also the component of anonymity on social media. So it's so easy to say trash and to just be absolutely hateful. So that's another challenge we see in these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just do kind of one more question, one more discussion before we wrap it up. And so, as horrible as it is, a black person being killed followed by protests is hardly a new story. And so, do you think that this particular instance and the massive response mixed with, you know, the social media and like you said, again, everyone being inside and being agitated already, having this massive response, do you think this may push the needle farther than previous instances? In your guys' opinion, is this particularly different?
I think it's different um, because it woke people up to the realities of Black people and just in general minority groups and marginalized groups. The fact that, as Akin said, we're all home and we have to reckon with these realities um, has, I think is going to create a change. And then the second part of it is we're very diverse. And I was reading a research article just about a week ago, and it was talking about how it was talking about white people and how they will react to someone telling them about an experience they had with racism, and their reaction is correlated with where they come from. And so if you're from someone that came from a very diverse city, and you have an education in multiculturalism, then you are very open to these conversations and you're willing to do the work. However, if someone is coming from a very rural type area or has no education in multiculturalism, these people are not quite open to having those conversations. And I think our world today, we're very diverse. We have diverse friend groups, diverse classrooms, whereas before that wasn't the case. So these conversations that are being had at a larger scale. In almost everyone's having this conversation. So that's why I think this time is different. And then lastly, I don't think the younger generation is denying history, and they're actually really educated and they're owning those histories and just being like, you know what, yep, we were on the wrong side of history here, and how can we make it better? And as Akin said, the fact that he's having conversations with his grandma, that clearly shows that, right? And I think when we own these stories, then we can, change the ending. And so I think that's how it's different here. And it makes me very optimistic about the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely I talked about how these circumstances, with Trump in the White House, with the COVID, with the lockdown, with all those circumstances around it. So those are just circumstantial. No one planned for George Floyd to die, just in the middle of all this. But I feel like all that actually added to the flames of the fire, and it actually made this altogether a very, very unique, movement, because just because of these circumstances. So there has been there has been such a huge, um, there has been a new, I don't want to call it noise, but it's just, there has been so much more awareness. The issues have been elevated to the forefront of, of conversations, debates, and discourse around the world. Like literally, like I saw paintings of George Floyd in like almost every country I can think of. So because of that, so it's definitely gonna be different, but let us still not think it's gonna change right away, because I've still seen some racism just between then and now that we're speaking right now. Human beings are tough cookies. We're just, you would think human beings are the most reasonable of all animals, because we have this thing called brains that are working quite well, but nah, it doesn't work like that. It takes a long time, especially for the older generation, because many of them, they are set in their ways. So as they say, it's difficult to teach old dogs new tricks. But for the new generation, I am 100% positive that we would see, like, our children won't face as much of these, inequalities as we are right now, because it's a new generation that is coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's something that hopefully can always give us a little bit of hope, is that, like you said, uh, the older generation, sometimes that's a tough nut to crack. And it the some people are just so set in their ways. And unfortunate as it is, the solution to that particular instance of racism, of the much older generation, may just be to wait them out and and prepare the next generation to be, as you've been saying, Akin, more woke and more sensitive to these issues. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's very possible. And you know with especially with social media being such a large part of young people's lives. And say what you will about that, but uh I think that exposure is the greatest way to familiarity. And so, like we touched upon, all action is good, but you can always do more, right? And I think that that's kind of a message that we can, sort of a main theme that we can carry out of here, as well as, this stuff isn't just a trend for so many people. This is the reality. And so, to always be doing what you can, and seeing what more you can be doing. Yeah. And so, if you guys had any more just closing remarks that you wanted to make, you guys go ahead on that.
I would just like to say, to those people that are really into advocating for change, um, it can be um, quite tiring. As someone that's in it, I had to be really honest with myself today as I was reflecting. It is a lot of work. So take care of your mental health. Be kind to yourself in this time. Not everyone's going to be on your side. But there is a beautiful quote by Roosevelt that said, the only people that matter are the people that are in the arena with you, and take those criticisms. But for the people that are on the sideline, just ignore them and just keep going. To allies, I want to say, be careful in how you're communicating these concepts, especially to the older generation. Shaming people will not get us anywhere. Talk to people, have open-minded conversations, and to some people, we can't take everyone with us. And so if someone is being very hard-headed and ignorant, that's not your fight. Just keep going. And thank you to the allies for helping us in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I like to add anything, it's just, those who are working, like, keep it up. Again, as Barack Obama said, it's actually, like, just saying Barack Obama back in 2008, I believe, when he got elected into the role of president, like, you could see how decades of advocacy and what is and activism actually paid off. So it's like, in as much as it seems like, and this might be to heaven to like in the moment it seems so difficult, but in the long haul, and Martin Luther King was saying that just as Moses, he might not get there with them. He did not. Martin Luther King, if he wasn't assassinated, he probably would be alive to see Barack Obama in the White House. But he just unfortunately couldn't see that dream being fulfilled. But it's like sometimes we just clear the pathway for the future generations, and that should give us a sense of fulfillment that this is bigger than us, but other people would inherit the hard work and the good ground we lay down for them. I think there's an indigenous quote that says, part of the indigenous tradition, that when you use a land, you should make sure that you leave it in the best shape for 10 generations to come. So that is how we should think that, for future generations, we might not benefit, but our great grandchildren will. And anyone who is wondering, how can I make a difference? How can I do something? Educate yourself. That's the best thing. As a black person, know your history. As a white person, same. Know your history. There's no shame about it. And when you study history, don't study history from the perspective of, oh, I would be the good guys. Of course, I won't be Hitler. I won't be the racist back then. You should study history from a realistic sense, because those who don't know their history are most likely to repeat it. And those who don't understand their history would ignorantly repeat it the same, even if you know that history. So just educate yourself and have conversations with other people and be open minded. That's a very reasonable and sustainable way to make a change.
Absolutely. Those are some terrific points to be ending on. So thank you guys so much for being with us. Did you guys have any social medias or websites or things that you guys wanted to plug just before that we wrap it up here?
Well, thank you for having us. It was a beautiful conversation. If you want to have these types of conversations or you want clarification on anything, you can reach me through the African Student Association email. That's usaskasa@gmail.com, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, and for me as well, I'm not so active on Facebook, but my Facebook is Akin Ben Akin one day, and Instagram it's one day underscore inspire. So WANDE underscore INSPIRE, I believe, and I also work at the True Alive Youth and Family Foundation, and we have an Instagram page, and my email is youthcoordinator at trulyalivefoundation.org. So if people want to reach out to me, that's the best.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for being with us today and keeping this conversation going, because that's so important. And so I hope that for anyone listening, you were able to learn something, or you were able to just listen, because that's equally as important. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.